Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. When I was younger, I could easily get myself into quite a few friendly arguments. Like everybody else, I have opinions, and some of them are stronger than others. The biggest problem with an opinion is that it's not always tied to facts. You would think that facts would convince people otherwise, but they don't seem to matter at all. And this becomes problematic, because if opinions are treated as facts and facts are dismissed as opinions, where does that leave you as a communicator? The reality is that you will always need to rely on facts, and you may not have a willing audience. It's because most people have their own ideas firmly in place. This is where misdirection helps tremendously. Misdirection isn't as strange as it sounds. It's simply what a magician does. He gets you to look at one thing, and he does something else entirely. Then he produces a result that you weren't expecting. The same principle can be applied when making presentations, writing articles, or creating any content that is meant to last. The trick is not to go head-on with someone who has a fixed point of view. That usually ends up in a slightly ridiculous argument, and even if you win, it leaves both sides with an unsettled feeling. In presentations, articles, and books, the reader has time to sit and ponder on what you've said, to mull over it quietly, and that shifts their thinking. Well, we think it will shift their thinking because you have presented the facts the way a magician would. Here is an example. Almost everyone you know will say something like, "I can remember people's faces, but I can't remember names." This idea has been repeated so many times that it has almost become a fact. If you try to convince someone directly that they can indeed remember names, they will smile and they'll shake their heads. So, take the back door instead. Use the power of misdirection. But the first step is always to ask permission. In a conversation, you might say, "Can I ask you a couple of questions on that subject?" Most people will agree. They are curious to know why you see it differently. Here's your first question. Can you remember the names of your family members? Your parents, your cousins, friends, relatives? Many of your teachers and the people you worked with? Generally, people will nod. Of course they can. Then you move on to movie actors, politicians, musicians, sports stars, and suddenly hundreds of names are streaming through their minds. And they have to agree that yes, they remember all of those too. You ask permission to continue, and they agree, but now they're sensing the trap. It's already closing in on them. You list names of countries, some that they've never visited. Afghanistan, New Caledonia, Fiji, Bangladesh, Azerbaijan. You might slip in Azerbaijan. And if you slip in one that they don't recognize, they'll say, "Oh, I don't know that." But the overall conclusion is now unavoidable. They know thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of names. And when you add in the names of everyday objects, sofa, pen, pencil, bird, then colors, plants, types of animals, the argument is effectively over. There is nothing wrong with their ability to remember names. There is simply a belief that they can't, and it's built on something else entirely. So what is that something else? The brain has a region, it's called Broca's area. When you see someone's face, even briefly, it is stored in your memory. You might not see that person for years, or encounter them in a completely different context, but the face remains. The name, however, has no dedicated retrieval system, and these are two separate things. There's the face and the name. They're two individual aspects. One has a storage area, the other doesn't. We remember faces because we have that specialized mechanism for it. We remember names when we build that same kind of system. So what just happened there? You've been misdirected. There's a reasonable chance that before listening to this, you believed that you weren't good at remembering names. Yet you now recognize that you carry tens of thousands of them in your head. It's probably occurred to you that the only reason why these names slip away is because we don't pay attention to them in the first place. Or because the name is genuinely unfamiliar. If I say a name like Lakshman Sivaramakrishnan and you're Indian, then you have no problem at all. But if the name is outside your experience, it takes effort. And without that effort, it's not going to stick. Let's take another example. This one is from the book Suddenly Talented, which examines how people become very good at learning and how they do so very quickly. One phrase that you hear constantly is, "I'm not good at maths." I had this conversation with my niece Kara when she was in year 7. I asked her how she was getting on in maths, and she said it was a little difficult. I could have simply told her that it wasn't. But as her uncle, she might just smile and agree to keep the peace. That wasn't the point. I wanted to misdirect her so that she would arrive at the conclusion herself. So Kara agreed. Year 7 maths was difficult. So I asked her about year 6. If given an exam from the previous year's syllabus, would she struggle? You can see where this is going, right? I worked backwards, year 6, year 5, year 4. By the time I reached year 2, she was rolling her eyes. Well, she was rolling her eyes long before then. So we come to the conclusion, and so did Kara, that was just the current year that was difficult. She had no problem agreeing because she had already admitted that every prior year had been manageable, and going further back would have almost been insulting. The same thing happens with adults. Anyone who says they are bad at maths will walk through the same sequence as Kara. They will agree that maths became difficult at a particular point, but hand them a year 3 paper and they'd sail through it. If you were to go at year 9, year 10, if you go into year 8, 9, 10, maybe they need a little work, but it's just a few weeks of work. It's not 10 years of schooling to get your maths up to scratch. So this concept that you're bad at maths, it's an opinion. It's not a fact. And you carry it for life. And this is where misdirection brings real change. It gets the point across without arguing. You agree, then you lead the person down a side road. You get them to see a flaw in their own thinking without making them feel attacked or diminished. They arrive at the conclusion themselves, which means that they own it. You haven't won an argument, you just opened the door. I experienced this firsthand while writing the brain audit around 2002. The central concept is that problems matter more than solutions in marketing. And it was quite radical at the time. If you picked up a sales book, it usually told you to lead with benefits, solutions, not problems. To get readers to rethink this, I didn't directly challenge the prevailing wisdom. Instead, I showed them examples. I told them about the 7 red bags. I said, imagine you put 7 red bags on a flight and then you get off at your destination and there are all these bags going around the conveyor belt and one is missing. So when do you leave the airport? And of course, everybody says only when all the 7 bags are accounted for. At this point, nobody's thinking of the pleasant flight, the on-time arrival, or the excellent seat. They are focused entirely on the problem. So there was a switch. I didn't need to convince them. They came to their own conclusion. but I gave them other examples. Imagine you're driving down the highway and you see the red and blue flashing lights in your rear view mirror. What happens to you? Or you go out to lunch and a small stain falls on your white shirt. Or alternatively, you turn on the news and there is a major storm warning. Based purely on these examples, there was a form of misdirection. Whether I spoke to an audience or they read it in the book, they realized that problems command the brain's attention before solutions get a look in. Once readers and listeners recognized that, they didn't need to be argued with. The solution didn't need to become less important, it simply needed to come in second. That single shift helped many people improve their sales because they finally had their customers' attention. Misdirection, then, is not a manipulation tactic. It's not about scoring points. It has a genuine, practical use. Most of us need to shift perception slightly. In customers, colleagues, students, sometimes in ourselves. It's only when people are willing to reconsider that real change happens. And people are willing when they don't feel cornered. A few well-placed questions can achieve what hours of argument cannot. The goal is not to defeat someone's position, but to walk alongside them until they can see it differently. And then they feel that the new view was their idea all along. This brings us to the end of the podcast. What did we cover? Well, it was just misdirection. The next time you feel the need to change someone's mind, resist the urge to go head on. When you ask for permission to explore the subject together, you can lead them through their own knowledge and experience. Let them arrive at the contradiction themselves. That is misdirection at its most effective. It's not a trick, but a form of respect. Eventually, they see things a bit differently because you brought out that wonder. It's like magic. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. And I hope you can't hear the rain because it's pouring down here in New Zealand. We've got an ex-tropical storm. You can't call it tropical once it comes to New Zealand. The tropics are up north. And there's this constant wave pattern that I see on the recording. But maybe a little noise cancellation and you won't hear a thing. But to get to what's happening, well, there's the storytelling course. And all of the things that you've heard in this podcast, and all the things that you hear on this podcast involve some sort of storytelling. But it's also in books. It's also in presentations. In this age of AI, it's probably the most important tool that you have, simply because AI can crank out articles quite well, even very well. But the storytelling, it still depends on you because you're going to bring in some personal stories. But in general, you become very good at storytelling and you have hundreds, if not thousands of stories that you can tell and create on demand. Not make it up, but actually tell these stories. This storytelling course will blow your mind. Go to psychotactics.com/workshops/storytelling and you can sign up for the course. You can get some goodies. And the course starts in June, but the doors open on April 11th. So get on that waiting list so that you get notifications. That's it from Psychotactics Land. I'll say bye for now. And if you haven't read The Brain Audit or Suddenly Talented, then do so because it combines both of these elements, misdirection and storytelling. And this is why clients keep going through the book because it becomes so entertaining. So try it for yourself. That's The Brain Audit and, I had to remember that name, Suddenly Talented. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye.